Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Paradise Lost, A Life of F. Scott Fitzgerald, by David S. Brown, narrated by David Colacci. With the end of winter set in another pleasant, pump-dry period, and while I took a little time off, a fresh picture of life in America began to form before my eyes. The uncertainties of 1919 were over. There seemed little doubt about what was going to happen. America was going on the greatest, gaudiest spree in history, and there was going to be plenty to tell about it. F. Scott Fitzgerald, 1937. Introduction. Cleo and Scott. I feel that Scott's greatest contribution was the dramatization of a heartbroken era. Zelda Fitzgerald, 1947. Scott Fitzgerald once wrote, "There never was a good biography of a good novelist. There couldn't be. He is too many people if he's any good." Despite this peremptory warning, several important Fitzgerald biographies have appeared over the years. Most have emphasized some particular aspect of the man, be it his personality, writings, relationships with women, or battles with the bottle. Each of these studies has benefited from a surplus of primary source material. Fitzgerald was a meticulous self-chronicler, leaving behind a large cache of notes, hundreds of letters, a detailed ledger, and several autobiographical essays. His admonitions notwithstanding, one might fairly argue for his role as a recurrent collaborator with the brotherhood of biographers. He wished to be understood on his own terms, principally as an artist immersed in his times, sensitive to change, and writing for the ages. As a point of departure, that is the premise behind this book. Within a larger life and work narrative, I treat Fitzgerald as a cultural historian, the analyst as novelist, who recorded the wildly fluctuating fortunes of America in the boom 20s and bust 30s. Equal parts author, observer, and participant, he supposed himself uniquely capable of probing below the surface of his society. "I really believe," he once put the matter to literary critic Edmund Wilson, his old Princeton classmate and an important influence, "that no one else could have written so searchingly the story of the youth of our generation. Certainly he captured its mood, aspirations, and uncertainties more evocatively than did any writer commenting on the era's strange mingling of ebullience and insecurity, this transformative period pinched between the destabling powers of two world wars." My own training as a historian has shaped how I read Fitzgerald and offers, I trust, a few fresh insights into a much-discussed life. To grasp Fitzgerald's concern in The Great Gatsby, for example, that the romantic pioneer promise of America no longer inspired its people, is to more broadly recognize his sharp reaction to the death of Victorian idealism that followed the Great War. In this respect, I see Fitzgerald less as a mere and familiar commentator on Gatsby's Jazz Age Manhattan than as a national and even an international interpreter in the company of such contemporaries as Gertrude Stein, John Maynard Keynes, and Pablo Picasso. Alike, they struggled to make sense of the first unsettled decades of the new century, a particularly violent epoch marked by the collapse of several European empires, a severe global economic downturn, and a fierce ideological struggle between democracy, communism, and fascism. It is this linking of the man and his much mythologized times that I emphasize in this book. Like most historians, Fitzgerald approached the past with a point of view. Though pigeonholed in popular memory as a Jazz Age epicurean, he was at heart a moralist, struck by the sudden cultural shift in mood and manners that trailed the ill-fated Treaty of Versailles. As he stressed to his daughter, Scotty, in 1938, "My generation of radicals and breakers down never found anything to take the place of the old virtues of work and courage and the old graces of courtesy and politeness." Deeply suspicious of money's stunning power in industrial America, Fitzgerald possessed a historical sensibility that leaned toward the aristocratic, the pre-modern, and the romantic. In a youth touched by financial uncertainty, he liked to imagine himself the foundling child of a courageous king. A hungry reader of history, his taste in biography ran to the great man school of Caesar and Napoleon. Money, the inevitable fins and wings of a restless modern West, meant little to Fitzgerald, except as a long-standing source of resentment. "I have never been able to forgive the rich for being rich," he once confessed, "and it has colored my entire life and works." With America's landed gentry passing from the scene, Fitzgerald's literary imagination was drawn to the new urban set, the bonds traders and the bootleggers, the Freudians and the flappers, suddenly in saddle. More than agents of affluence, these archetypes of the roaring 20s now set the cultural tone and tempo, seizing from small-town America the socializing power to shape a civilization. As a popular short story writer, Fitzgerald enjoyed access to the new money, and it gave him a vantage of cultural insight that would have been otherwise closed. Still, he never thought of himself, even during his peak earning years, as being part of the nouveau riche. His deepest allegiances, rather, were to that rapidly fading complex of courtly antebellum beliefs that he connected with his father's fashionable Chesapeake Bay roots. More specifically, as a midwesterner, as an Irish Catholic, and, despite a steady stream of royalties and advances, as a perpetually in-debt author, he felt every bit the social and economic outsider in the haute bourgeoisie haunts, Lake Forest, Princeton, and certain Hollywood enclaves, that had such a prevailing impact on his work. Wilson hit the mark when saying of Fitzgerald, "He casts himself in the role of the playboy, yet at the playboy he incessantly mocks." Fitzgerald's historical awareness was at its core sentimental, nostalgic, and conservative. He never lost his boyish enthusiasm for the valor of Civil War generals or collegiate football heroes, nor did he doubt that the coming world of large-scale bureaucratic structures, whether in the guise of rising capitalist corporations or powerful trade unions, would injure the cause of individual freedom, glory, and ambition. In his everyday life, Fitzgerald held, as this book explores, rather conventional to ultra-conventional views on sex, marriage, and child-rearing. His choice in homes reflected further a taste for playing the country squire that time forgot. From 1927 to 1929, the Fitzgeralds leased Ellerslie, a ducal 1842 Greek Revival mansion situated alongside the Delaware River just outside of Wilmington. In the early 1930s, they moved to La Paix, a rambling Victorian in a wooded area north of Baltimore, where Scott completed what some people believe to be his best book, Tender is the Night. He thought of this last address as a return home of sorts. Though Minnesota-born, he descended on his father's side from several pre-revolutionary Maryland families. Armed with a patriotic pedigree, he claimed a distant connection to Francis Scott Key. Fitzgerald saw himself as something of an authentic aristocrat put out to pasture by the pocketbook power of wealthy arrivistes. "I believe he'd have lived a completely happy life and died a happy death," his good friend John Biggs, Jr. told a reporter in the 1970s, "as an Irish landed gentleman of the 17th century." The solidity of place and station to which Fitzgerald aspired no doubt reflected the ongoing uncertainties of his situation. Put simply, Scott uprooted easily. In some sense, the pretensions of an established Maryland lineage cushioned the reality that he remained throughout his life a restless and somewhat transitory figure. Before the age of 13, he had lived in St. Paul twice, Syracuse, and Buffalo twice. When he was an adult, this itinerant pattern continued. Move followed move on both sides of the Atlantic.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?